Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, sponsored by the Draft Professors. Joined today by Draft Professor Peter Quinn, who is live from Scotland. Peter, daily greetings from across the Atlantic Ocean. How are you doing on this fine Wednesday?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks. Looking forward to getting stuck into some more Seattle mock drafts. Work's all done for the day, and it's a nice, quiet, peaceful evening.
Yeah, so we've done some Seattle mocks with Peter before. We're gonna do more Seattle mocks today. So, Peter, if I remember correctly, first of all, second round Fanatic Challenge is this button right here, which is 10 unique 2-round drafts. And we picked Seattle. So, Peter, memory serves me correctly, you're really making sure Seattle comes out of rounds 1 and 2 with an edge. Any other positions that you're definitively looking at for Seattle?
Again, maybe a little more depth in the interior defensive line, and if there's a really good guard prospect available, I think that would be another need that would be up there. Because, as everyone knows, there are many compilations of right guard Anthony Bradford's mishaps here and there throughout the season, and that would be kind of another nice piece for them to add to that offensive line.
Okay. So Seattle right now in the simulator is picking 32nd. This podcast is being recorded 2 weeks before the Super Bowl. So the final draft order could change by one spot. But the draft so far is Mendoza, Bain, Reese, Tate, Maui Noah, Fano, Downs, Tyson, Styles, Bailey, Delane, Lomu, Sadiq, Ione, Falk, Woods, Proctor, Love, Parker, Allen, Lemon, Pregnon, Terrell, Boston, Banks, McDonald, Concepcion, Thieneman, McCoy, World, Howell, Seattle on the board at 32. What are your thoughts?
I mean, even just looking at the names, I was sort of surprised that I nearly managed to get Jermod McCoy. He's usually gone a wee touch earlier than that in many of the drafts I see. I think to start off with, I'll stick with what I was talking about before. I think it's important that Seattle manages to replenish that edge rusher room, potentially set to lose Boye Mafe this year. It'll be Derek Hall's contract year the following season. They've got DeMarcus Lawrence, who's performing brilliantly for them on this Super Bowl run. However, he is a pretty old player in terms of that position in the league. And I think that Zion Young would be my first choice here. Really well-rounded prospect. Has shown that he can play against the run and is an excellent pass rush bag. So he would be my choice there, I think, ideally.
Okay, and now we're on the clock for Seattle at pick 64. Dominique Orange is sitting at the top of the draft board. What else would Seattle want to come out of the first 2 rounds with?
Yeah, I mean, so Orange would be an excellent choice here. I think I've also got potentially, if we look at the wide receiver board here, I think there could be some guys. So look at a couple of names
Lane
there.
First.
So I think that Lane and perhaps even Malachi Fields would be guys who would work here. Someone to take over in that kind of possession receiver role, potentially from Cooper Kupp. If he could play out the rest of his contract in Seattle, it's also one that the Seahawks could get out of after the end of this season. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them look to find a kind of bigger, more physical receiver. Malachi Fields has excellent hands. Lane maybe more of a red zone threat, which would be interesting. So I'd maybe this time around I'll go for Jacoby Lane as my pick here.
Okay, so the first 2-round draft was Zion Young, Jacoby Lane. So the simulator immediately starts another mock. Zion Young is now higher than Chase Besantis. So that was one immediate observation, is just that one mock. Zion Young has moved up the board a little bit. Thoughts on what you would do here in round 1 with your next mock?
So if we look at the other edge rushers that we've got available just now, I'll maybe have a wee look here and see who else I do really like Malachi Lawrence as a prospect, but I think to switch things up a bit, I'll go for somebody that I think works for the Seahawks because he can come in and contribute right from next season. A kind of more experienced prospect in that edge class. I think Akeem Mesidor. Obviously, everyone's seen the excellent impact he's had this year playing across from Ruben Bain. I think he could come into that Seahawks edge room and immediately lift the floor, improve the depth there, and could be a massive asset for Seattle there.
Okay, so at pick 64, Jacoby Lane got sniped 9 picks before you were on the clock. After you take Akeem Mesidor in round 1, and without Jacoby Lane being available, who is your next best second-round pick for Seattle?
So this time, I think I will go for the one that's there. I really liked Dominique Orange as a prospect, and I think again he's somebody that could come in and actually, rather than Mesidor's situation, Orange would have some time to grow into his role with the Seahawks. Wouldn't need to play too many snaps immediately. You've got Byron Murphy there, you've got Jaron Reed, you've got Leonard Williams, plenty of kind of really experienced and talented guys to learn from, and I think that could turn into a really a massive strength for the Seahawks because then it frees up those edge rushers when you've got guys taking up double teams in the middle of the line, and that's something that certainly I think that Orange's physical attributes would demand even at the NFL level.
Okay, and now we are in the 3rd mock, and this time Cassius Howell dropped. Thoughts on what you would do at pick 32 if your choices are Cassius Howell, Zion Young, Malachi Lawrence, and I think Akeem Mesidor is also available.
Well, if we change it up a little bit, if we look at the wide receivers available here potentially,
Surratt, Brazel, Bell, Cooper, Bernard.
Yeah, so there's maybe not quite anyone that I would take at this stage, I think. So if we go back, if we stick with the edge rusher, we'll try Cassius Howell here. I think, again, it would be a very different role for him coming into that Seahawks roster as opposed to the likes of a Zion Young. Much more of a pass rusher, kind of not quite designated pass rusher in terms of that being his only snaps that he would deserve. However, in terms of the impact plays you're going to get from him, I certainly think that's the main area of strength there.
So you're on the clock in round 2. Jacoby Lane and Dominique Orange are available. Akeem Mesidor is sitting at the top of the board. From a definition of how this would work, if you chose Mesidor, because you picked him in round 1, so you clearly would like him in round 2 as well. If you pick Mesidor here, you won't be able to pick him for the duration of the second-round challenge.
Yeah,
it's okay to pick it.
Yeah, I wouldn't double up, I don't think. And I also see an intriguing name there. I see no scenario now where Lee Hunter makes it this far in the draft. I think he's obviously someone who people are paying a lot of attention to this week with the Senior Bowl. But throughout the season, every time that I caught some of the Texas Tech matches, there's plenty of people to pay attention to in that outstanding defense. But he was one, kind of play in, play out. He was absolutely excellent, a physical force. And again, I think he'd fit right in, have plenty of experienced guys to learn from and make a massive impact for Seattle. If he fell to pick whether it's 63 or 64 the Seahawks end up with, I think the Seahawks would be sprinting up to announce that pick. However, it wouldn't surprise me if he's perhaps even gone before they pick in the first round.
Yeah. So the general idea behind the simulator is I love your mindset. If Hunter's there, pick him. So my advice to anybody doing a second round challenge, if your head says that player shouldn't be there, you need to pick him. Because the more somebody's picked in the simulator, the more they move up. So the idea is if you skip picking somebody, they're going to keep dropping. If you pick them, like Peter just did with Hunter, you're essentially saying nobody, if you want Hunter, you have to pick him before Seattle. And if everybody does that with 32 teams, you're going to get a different mock drafting experience. So We're doing the fourth of the 10 mocks for the second round challenge. Seahawks are on the clock at 32. You can pick the same player. You can pick different players. Completely up to you, Peter.
While I still see options that I like, I'll keep going for different ones at the moment. So if we scroll a little down there at the moment, who have we got? Yeah, there's nobody immediately standing out that would be a change up here. I've been somebody who's complained about the Seahawks regularly being paired with a cornerback in the first round. I think that they're going to keep one of Reek Woolen or Josh Jobe. However, I do love Keith Abney as a prospect. I think he's an excellent player, and should the Seahawks decide to let both of those guys go, then Keith Abney would be a sensible pick to come in. I think he could start right away across from Devon Witherspoon. However, that's with the caveat that personally, I would be looking to keep one of Woolen or Jobe, and I think that cornerback then is not the biggest need for the Seahawks, despite it being probably the most regularly mocked position for them in round one in terms of the drafts which I've seen online recently.
Okay, so Abney in round one. Your edge board in round two includes Mesidor, R. Mason Thomas, Romello Height, Gabe Akis, and then there's some other names a little bit further down. Not sure if you like them in round two or not.
There are some names that I like there. I think with all those options, there's probably going to be somebody, some of those guys still there by the time the Seahawks pick in round three in reality. So I would maybe I'll change things up a bit here. And if we say that the Seahawks are not necessarily keeping the players in this draft class, I think maybe have a look at the running backs. I think that potentially if they don't hold on to Kenneth Walker, then for me, I like Jadarian Price, but for me, Jonah Coleman would be an excellent pick here. Love the kind of explosive nature of his impact in the run game, and I think that he would fit right in with kind of what the Seahawks are looking to build on offense.
Okay, so now we've started the fifth of the 10 mocks. Seahawks are on the clock at pick 32. What are your thoughts here for round one?
Again, I'm kind of. I think the board's not necessarily fallen. The way I'd hope. Maybe ideally you'd hope for a potentially Caden McDonald or even a Denzel Boston or someone to fall to the Seahawks at 32 that would persuade me to change it up. But as it is, I think I'll double up this time and I'll go for Zion Young again because I do like that pick for the Seahawks.
Okay, so we'll go Zion Young round one. And then for the round two pick, Jacoby Lane, Dominique Orange, Lee Hunter, Jonah Coleman, all sniped before the Seahawks pick at 64. Thoughts on what you think Seattle would do?
Yeah, so I like D'Angelo Pons. I don't think it's necessarily a great fit with the Seahawks, though, so I won't go for him. If we have a look at the wide receivers again, I'll go back to this list here, and I'll have a look at Malachi Fields this time. I think he's another guy who's potentially rising up boards this week with a strong showing so far at the Senior Bowl practices. But he's somebody that I liked even when we did our first wide receiver podcast in the summer. He was someone that we looked at, and excellent hands, some of the best in the class, really low drop rate. And he's a better athlete than he gets credit for as well, I think, despite kind of that larger frame at kind of 6'5", I think he was measured in at this week. So, yeah, I think that would be a nice fit for the Seahawks.
Okay, so we're doing the sixth of the 10 mocks. You're on the clock again in round one. Thoughts on what you want to try to do here?
I'll change it up a little bit again. I think it's a bit early for him, really. But if we have a look at going for Chase Bisontis here, I don't necessarily have him as a first-round pick, but I think there's a chance the Seahawks do look at a guard there. Ideally, I imagine they'll be hoping that Prignon might be there. He's somebody that I rate slightly higher than Bisontis personally. But if the Seahawks went there, kind of they went for a guard last year. They saw the impact it had. Grays Abel has been a really effective part of their O-line this year. He's allowed them to kind of get that run game going. You can see the highlights each week of him blocking kind of 20 yards downfield and plays sometimes alongside the centre Jalen Sundell. So it's made a big difference to the Seahawks, and perhaps they could look to double up there next season.
Okay. In round 2, Jacoby Lane, Dominique Orange, Lee Hunter, Jonah Coleman, Malachi Fields, all sniped before your second round pick. AJ Halsey dropped. He was not available before.
I like Halsey. In fact, if we get the safety board that's remaining at the moment, because I think there's a good chance that the Seahawks could be looking for one somewhere in the draft. And I like Taft, but yeah, I think Halsey's probably the best prospect available here, so we'll go for him. I think that the Seahawks maybe don't keep Kobe Bryant around next season. He's another one that's an upcoming free agent, and even getting somebody in to compete with Ty Okada, who's been extremely impressive this year for them, to find that starting safety spot for next season. I think that would be a solid choice for them in round 2.
Okay. So something I'm going to point out, so we're back to the round 1 pick. Ty Simpson started at 17th on the board, and we're continually skipping him. I'm not implying Seattle should consider Ty Simpson in round 1, but what I would like to point out is the way the simulator works is that if you skip picking a player, they will eventually drop on the board. So as long as we continually skip picking Ty Simpson whenever he's available, we should see, for example, Zion Young or Cassius Howell move higher than Simpson on the board.
Yeah, and I think that it's obviously not one that necessarily works for the Seahawks at the moment with their situation at quarterback. Obviously, a talented player, but I think that's been something that I've enjoyed whenever I've used the simulator so far. Is that it is, as you've mentioned, it's an interactive. It responds to kind of the picks that you make, and it also makes it a lot of fun to use. So I think this time, if we scroll down a bit, I'll see if I can change it up, go for something a little more out of left field.
Any thoughts on a linebacker in round 1? Would it be Anthony Hill Jr., Josiah Trotter? How high are you on either of them?
So I'm not as high on Anthony Hill Jr. I think it's also slightly early for Trotter. But we could we could go for Trotter, I think. Like I said, I'd probably prefer that pick if he fell to them in round 2. Drake Thomas has been excellent, but I think it's a position where if you give a guy maybe a year or two potentially to grow into it, kind of learn the game at NFL level, get up to speeds in practice every week, then that could be a pick that could be useful long term for Seattle. It's one of the great things about the situation the Seahawks are in my opinion. It makes it a bit of a strange experience this year, drafting for kind of doing mock drafts for them, because in the past there's been some glaring holes on the roster that needed filled, and that kind of dictated a lot of what I would certainly look to do in a lot of my mock drafts in recent years. This year, the roster's pretty well rounded, as shown by the success they're having. So it's a little tougher to find the obvious gaps that need filled. I think it's kind of finding depth with perhaps long-term upside. So that's why it wouldn't surprise me to see them take a guy like Malachi Lawrence and pick one like I did earlier, or taking a swing on somebody like Josiah Trotter.
Okay, so Josiah Trotter round 1. Kamari Ramsey has fallen. Lane, Orange, Hunter, Coleman, Fields, and Halsey were all sniped before the Seattle pick at 64. What do you think Seattle would do?
Again, there's a couple of names on the edge board who I quite like, who we've not had a go at yet. So if we have a look there in this this draft, I will go for Derek Moore this time. Another guy who obviously showed up with a couple of big reps that got some attention on social media this week at the Senior Bowl already. But he's a player who's stacked good reps for throughout his time at college. And he can, one of those ones. He's got the ability to make O linemen look silly with kind of the general power profile he's got. Really good impact as a power rusher. So yeah, he'd be another one to add into the Seattle rotation, who I think could have a big impact for them.
Okay. We're now in the 8th of the 10 mocks for the second round challenge. Seattle is on the clock in round 1. Thoughts on what you would do here?
I think this time I will double up on Cassius Howell, and then we'll see what the second round brings up for us. I think, again, there's plenty of guys in that first round who I would love it if they fell to Seattle, whether, as I mentioned, Boston or McDonald's. But there are more players. Well, TJ Parker is one that some people have fallen to round 2 due to a kind of less than stellar season at Clemson. But I think that would be an excellent pick for the Seahawks again as an edge rusher there. Looking at my options here in round 2, I think I will go for. If I go to the wide receivers again, there was a name that was there earlier. I'll double check. Yeah, so another guy who's getting some attention at the moment, who I know we've podcasted about recently quite a bit. Yeah, Ted Hurst out of Georgia State. Another guy who, kind of really good size profile, good hands, good contested catch guy. And I think he could provide a little bit of X factor for the Seahawks in that wide receiver room, because they do need to make sure that they've got a wide range of options other than JSN there, despite him obviously being the primary target, getting the lion's share of the targets. But they need to find some variety there, and I think that would be a useful pickup for them in Ted Hurst.
Okay, so we're in the 9th of the 10 mocks. Seattle's on the clock in round 1. Thoughts on what you want to try in this 2-round mock?
I'll double check, just make sure I'm not missing anyone on the defensive line prospects, and kind of the interior prospects. Maybe I'll have a look there. So I think we've chosen a lot of these edge rushers. So if we ever look at the defensive tackles, so I think the one at the top there, I think Kristen Miller is an excellent prospect. I think that it's perhaps a little bit of a reach there. I don't necessarily have him quite that high. However, as I said, I think the Seahawks can afford to take some risks in this draft, given the strength of the roster, kind of from top to bottom. So getting a guy in to kind of improve that defensive line group long term, he doesn't need to come in and make an impact immediately. I think would be a great pick for them, with some real upside down the line, and continuing that defensive front being a real position of strength for a long while to come, potentially.
Okay, so in round 2, Jacoby Lane, Dominique Orange, Lee Hunter, Jonah Coleman, Malachi Fields, AJ Halsey, Derek Moore, Ted Hurst, snipe before Seattle is on the clock. What would Seattle do?
And this time around, I think, kind of for similar reasons that I mentioned with Halsey, looking at Kamari Ramsey, I think could be a nice pick there. Again, I think it's another position where the Seahawks it doesn't desperately need to be a starter immediately. He can kind of come and build up his reps with the Seahawks and potentially be a more of a long-term contributor. So yeah, I think that would be another one that would set them up for success long-term. And I think it's excellent for young players to be in a position where they come into the league and don't have to be kind of under pressure, relied upon to be playing the majority of snaps from day one. If your roster is kind of well enough stacked that you can afford to ease them into it, then that's a massive advantage to have.
Okay, and now we're in the final mocks. We're doing the 10th of the 10 for the second round challenge. Who is the last first round pick that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think, do you know what? I'll change it up this time. And again, as mentioned before, I think it's a little bit of a reach, but I will go for the Tennessee wide receiver, Chris Brazell. again, another big receiver, like I was talking about, that I think would perhaps round out Seattle's receiver room. And if you can get a guy like that who, obviously, really good catch radius, kind of good speed and movement skills for his size as well. And I think that's something that you could pair with JSN kind of long term, who could be a real difference maker. Because I think the Seahawks had a really nice pick last year, getting Torrey Horton in the middle rounds. He could be an effective contributor for them in the future as well. However, there's just going to be constant issues with his injury concerns, I think, at the moment, that it looks like he's going to struggle to kind of make it through entire seasons. He picked up a couple of knocks even before going on to IR to end the season. So I think that's one that he'll be useful when he's available, but the Seahawks should still be looking to find somebody else to kind of round out that receiver room, as mentioned.
Okay. And we're at your final round 2 pick. And the simulator does a good job of sniping Jacoby Lane, Dominique Orange, Lee Hunter, Jonah Coleman, Malachi Fields, AJ Halsey, Derek Moore, Ted Hurst, Kamari Ramsey, all players that you like for Seattle. Simulator makes sure that they are off the board. Is this easy or hard for you to find a player that you like here in the 10th mock draft that we're doing?
It's actually not too bad. I think I've managed to kind of spread it out quite nicely. So here, I think if Malachi Lawrence makes it to the Seahawks at the bottom of the second round, then that's definitely the pick there. As long as we've not gone for an edge rusher in the first round. Again, I think that's a position that potentially the Seahawks could look to take a long-term tackle prospect. But again, they've got 2 guys under contract for a good long while in Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas. And I don't think that they're going to need a starter for a good long while. Those guys are still young and they're still able to contribute, I think, for some time. So, I think that maybe second round still a touch early for them to take what could be a long-term swing tackle. I think that'd be more likely with one of their later picks, potentially the third rounder, if the right person fell to them.
Okay. So my advice to anybody doing a second round challenge. So the first time you go through it, you're going to see some C's. And I think we even got a D. Yeah. So the first time we picked Mesidor in round 1, it was a D. So you're going to see some C's and D's. When you do these and you're getting, like, if you can do one of these and like all your picks are A+, I want you to post it and I want you to tag me in it. Right? So the idea is if you get A+ across the board, that means that you pretty much have your board implemented for your team. So the significance of doing one of these, I'm going to come in and do a 4-round mock for Buffalo. So, and we're going to pay attention to who Seattle takes in the mock. So what should be happening is the players that Peter took in his second round challenge are who we should see Seattle taking during its mock. So Buffalo, I like McDonald over Banks. I did not see who Seattle took.
It was Cassius Hill, so that kind of tracks with what we did there.
Yep. And then round 2, I think Romello Height is going to become a Buffalo Bill. So Seattle in round 2 to Kristen Miller. So that was one of the players that you took.
Yep.
And then this is Buffalo's round 3 pick. I have not taken a linebacker yet. This is going to be Red Murdoch. And then Malik Benson. Okay, so in round 3,
Malachi Fields.
So even though you took him in round 2, he's high enough in Seattle's board that he was the top player in Seattle's board when round 3 came around. So even your second round challenge is impacting who Seattle is taking in round 3. So unless other people take Malachi Fields more so that he moves up their board, right now he's fallen to Seattle. But that's a pretty good mock for Seattle, right? If they get Fields, Howell, and Miller, like if those are your day 1 and 2 picks, you're pretty happy, I think, right?
Delighted. Yeah, that sounds excellent. So I think that the Seahawks would be especially happy with that, and it's nice that, as you mentioned, that ties in pretty well with I think what we did in our Fanatic Challenge there.
Yep. So, why don't we? Well, yeah, let's do a first round challenge for Seattle, and then we'll call it a podcast. So, a first round challenge is 5 unique 1-round drafts. So we'll have Peter on the clock for 5 1-round drafts for Seattle. This usually takes about 10 minutes. And one of the reasons for that is that I want to make sure Ty Simpson's not at the top of Seattle's board. Like if you didn't do this, I was going to do it immediately following, like as soon as we closed out the podcast. So what I'm focused on is, can we get the edges and the players that we like, that Peter likes, ahead of Ty Simpson on the Seattle board? So Howell's off the board. Who is the best player available here for you, Peter?
So for me in this situation, I think in terms of best fit for Seattle, he's not. I think best fit for Seattle would be Zion Young here. I like Keith Abney. Maybe I'd have him rated higher as a prospect. However, for Seattle, I think the fit there works really nicely.
Okay. And then the simulator on the second mock makes sure that Zion Young is off the board before Seattle's pick. Is this Cassius Howell if he's available?
Yeah, definitely for me. I think Cassius Howell would be an excellent pick there. Same as I said before. I think that he's kind of a real impact player as a pass rusher, potentially a pure pass rusher. But yeah, fantastic impact selection for Seattle there.
Okay. And then if Young and Howell are not there, who is your BPA for this list?
So it is definitely the BPA for me. I had mentioned before that I'd really hoped that Caden McDonald would fall to me in a couple of these mocks, because I think he's an excellent prospect, and I do hold out some hope that he could be available at the end of the first round. I think that he's an even better prospect than Tyleik Williams was coming out of Ohio State as a defensive lineman last year. I think that he's potentially potentially more explosive and consistent, I think. But excellent player to fall to Seattle there.
So the rumor for Buffalo is that Jim Leonard, who is a defensive coach for Denver, will be Buffalo's defensive coordinator. He runs an odd front defense. So I would think that one of the defensive tackles, Buffalo doesn't have a true one tech on the roster. So my hope would be that Caden McDonald is Buffalo's pick.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting one. So how would you see him looking to use Deontay Walker then in that sort of front?
Yep. So Deontay Walker, ironically, is a really good 3-4 defensive end. Right? So don't let his size fool you. But you don't want Deontay Walker taking on 2 blockers. You want him in a situation where he can move sideways and try to get to the play laterally. So Buffalo was using Deontay Walker more at 3 tech last season. And he would be, my opinion would be that Deontay Walker would be a better 3-4 defensive end with a player like Caden McDonald over the center. And then like a Greg Rousseau would be the other edge. And then on passing downs, you kick Rousseau outside, and you'll probably replace a player like McDonald with Ed Oliver.
That makes sense. I think a lot of the profile for Walker as well was the fact that he was so hampered by that injury he had in his last year at college, which potentially, if that limits his movement, kind of, and the excellent movement skills that he's got for that size, then perhaps it kind of meant that they were restricted to kind of using him more as your kind of nose tackle style player, despite that not necessarily being his game, as you mentioned. Yeah, no, fantastic.
Okay. So now Young, Howell, McDonald are sniped from you. Concepcion dropped. What are your thoughts on what you would do here?
It's a tough one again because actually, I mean, I like Concepcion as a prospect. I think potentially he's just about best player available here, but I don't love the fit with Seattle. I don't think that he's kind of. I don't think it's exactly what they're needing here. Again, I'll kind of pivot to Keith Abney. I think that he's a guy that I have definitely. I think that he shouldn't be getting out of the first rounds. I think he's kind of definitely in that range, kind of late first rounds, maybe picks kind of 23, 24 down to the end of the first. So that would make sense there, despite, as I mentioned, I don't love. I'd be disappointed, in fact, if this Seahawks let Rick Woolen and Josh Jobe go and went to cornerback there. So, but we'll presume this is a world where that's happened. Woolen's been whisked off for 20 odd million by teams who looked at his rookie year and thought we're getting a Pro Bowl corner here, and Josh Jobe is left to become a starter somewhere, and the Seahawks need to find someone to pair with Devon Witherspoon. I think Keith Abney would be an excellent fit, really good tackler, nice click and close ability, and good in coverage. He's not, the kind of the, he's not like Kelly Jones was somebody and who was potentially going to be in this draft class. Great size, great movement skills. Abney's not as immediately noticeable in that regard, but I think he's a really excellent player, and I had him firmly near the top of my cornerback board when we were talking through it throughout the season there.
Okay, and then the final one: Zion Young, Cassius Howell, Caden McDonald, Keith Abney. 4 players that you like have all been sniped. You're looking at Isaiah World, Casey Concepcion, Dylan Thieneman, Chase Besantis, Chris Brazel, Josiah Trotter, Malachi Lawrence, Kristen Miller. Thoughts on what Seattle would do here?
I think if we scroll down slightly there, I think obviously Isaiah World fallen that far is the first time we've had that, I think, in our mocks that we've been doing here. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's a position of need or a real match for the Seahawks at the moment. So I will, as I did a couple of times in the second round challenge, I'll go for Malachi Lawrence here. I think that would be again, it's taken a bit of a leap of faith on the prospect, looking at the upsides rather than the kind of consistency in production compared to some of the other edges that we've mentioned. I know, obviously, ideal world, I think TJ Parker is available. I think for me, he's the one that I'm looking at as the ideal pick for the Seahawks there. If you get a Caden McDonald or a Denzel Boston, that's also a great result. But kind of I know that a lot of the boards here have kind of solidified with players doing, as we saw, there's so many drafts. It's kind of firmed up the draft order, so those guys are often getting picked quite high. But out of the ones that are left, the kind of a Zion Young would be a good prospect. Cassius Howell, another nice option. Lee Hunter would kind of an excellent one, but he's often not fallen quite as far. But I think Hunter would be another excellent pick where we're seeing we saw what he could do all year long, and we're seeing it again this week at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, so when you go through one of the exercises in the simulator, whether it's a first round challenge, second round challenge, fanatic mode, what you're essentially doing is setting up the board. So here's what I mean by that. So Lee Hunter was 58 when Peter picked him. He moved up to 50. Ted Hurst was 72. He moved up to 59. And what I was trying to do, if we look at where Ty Simpson is. So see how Simpson is here at 20. And Howell, McDonald, Young, players that you like, still not higher than Ty Simpson. So I know I will be paying attention to the Seattle board because I don't want Seattle picking a quarterback. So if teams ahead of them are not picking Ty Simpson, I know Seattle won't. So I will make sure that I come in and do the first round challenges enough that there's like 3 players ranked higher than Ty Simpson.
Yeah, and Zion Young, I think, was a lot lower than that when we started, wasn't he? And he's now up at 24. So I think the more mock drafts I do, where there's no TJ Parker or Denzel Boston potentially, then we'll see Zion Young continue to move up, as well as a couple of others that we picked there. I think Howell will be another one that I imagine will be quickly moving above Simpson as I continue to do more drafts on the simulator here.
Yep. Yeah. So normally what I do is the first time somebody podcasts, I want to try to get round 1 close, and then just make sure like rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4 have players that people like. Then come in and do probably 2 second round challenges. The second time you do a second round challenge, you should be getting all A's and a lot of A pluses. Right, which means that the players that you like are sitting at the top of your favorite team's draft board. But just to give you an idea, for example, even Buffalo hiring a new head coach has completely changed how I think Buffalo's going to draft, because if we do switch to a 3-4 defense, there's some defensive linemen and linebackers that we need that we don't have. Right? Maybe we'll pick them up in free agency, but I would think that Buffalo is more likely to draft a defensive tackle in round 1 now if it's the Lee Hunter or the Caden McDonald that can play over the center. That kind of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, it makes a massive difference as well. I imagine it could potentially be a similar thing for the Seahawks, depending on if Clint Kubiak gets whisked away in one of the 2 remaining head coach roles. Then potentially we could see someone else with a different identity who maybe wants, for example, it could be somebody who wants one of those kind of big physical receivers to be a kind of main feature of the offense, which at the moment it's not. You've got Cooper Kupp there, you've got JSN, kind of 2 historically slot guys. I know JSN's showed this year that he's able to play outside, but sometimes you get coordinators who want to have that big physical possession receiver who can help the quarterback get the ball out early. It takes a bit of pressure off the offensive line, obviously, if Sam Darnold's throwing the ball in the first couple of seconds post snap. So that's where potentially someone like certainly in the second round, as we were seeing there, Jacoby Lane or Ted Hurst, maybe even Malachi Fields or something like that comes into play for the Seahawks where they might not otherwise.
Yep. And I think Kubiak was actually my preferred candidate for Buffalo. I actually think Buffalo's hiring of Brady was that Brady was a really good plan B and they didn't like plan C. So if you're not sure if you could get Kubiak, but you knew you could get Brady, there was no reason for Buffalo to wait 2 weeks, because Buffalo hasn't spoke to Kubiak because Buffalo was still playing right during that, right? Because you're allowed to interview people the first week of the playoffs. Buffalo was still playing, so they couldn't interview Kubiak. And then therefore Buffalo could not interview Kubiak this week because they hadn't interviewed him yet. You're allowed to do second interviews this week, but you can't do first interviews if the team is still playing.
And I think that's been a big part of it, and why the Seahawks are maybe starting to get a bit optimistic. He might still be around next season. And I think I've maybe even mentioned on the podcast before another reason, which is that Kubiak, when he's spoken to the press, he's not the kind of, he's not got that kind of big, loud personality that teams often look for in a head coach. He's quite a quiet guy. He's focused on the X's and O's, and he's got his plan. It's been very good for the Seahawks. But when you see the guy interviewed, he's not a guy who makes you want to run through a wall. He's an extremely intelligent offensive coordinator, really good offensive mind. I think a team might still take a chance on that and hope that he kind of grows into the head coach role, becomes a bit more outgoing, and maybe he's just not had the chance to show that yet. That could be a factor. But seeing him speak to the press, I've seen multiple people, one being Dan Viens, kind of Seahawks Forever podcaster, who's kind of very well liked, well respected in the Seahawks community. He's mentioned that right from the start of the process, is that he doesn't believe that a team will hire Kubiak because the guy's just kind of not got that. It's not got that inspirational kind of aspect to him, kind of charisma that a team often looks for in their head coach. And I can kind of see where he's coming from there. I think that will be something that is also factored in to the fact that he's still available, and obviously, as mentioned, the whole interview process, the fact the Seahawks are still playing, also makes a difference there as well.
Yep. So, and again, if people who are watching didn't understand, let's say, the interview logic. So if your team is out of the playoffs like the Raiders were allowed to interview Kubiak prior to the wild card round, right? I believe that was when the Raiders interviewed Kubiak. Okay.
So, yeah.
The Raiders were out of the playoffs. They were allowed to conduct interviews with coaches that were still playing wild card round. Well, Buffalo was playing the wild card round, so they still had a head coach. So Buffalo didn't conduct any interviews. The rule is then this week, Kubiak could have a second interview with the Raiders. He could have a second interview, but he could not have a first interview if the team did not interview him wild card week. Just to kind of clarify what went down. So I'm happy Buffalo has a head coach. I'm happy that it's Joe Brady because Joe Brady checks the boxes. But let's just say I'm not excited until I see what the product on the field is, because anything less than winning a Super Bowl in this coaching hire is a failure.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the tougher openings out there, because there's, you go into, I don't know, you go into the Raiders, you go into the Browns. If you make the playoffs within the first 2, maybe even 3 seasons, then you've done a good job. You've done an excellent job. If you go into the Bills and 2 or 3 seasons later you've not got a Super Bowl, then you're not going to be in that job anymore. So yep. It's definitely an interesting prospect, and even just as you mentioned, the process is it's an interesting ride all in all, because you've got Clint Kubiak there trying to formulate his game plan for this Super Bowl. Meanwhile, on Saturday, he's got a second interview. I can't remember which of the 2 jobs that's left is that he's got that. But he's got 2 interviews taking place, I believe, over the next few days.
There's only 2 openings, so it's the Raiders and the Cardinals.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it is that he's got on Saturday, but but he's got interviews there that that's the guy's future that he's planning for there, all while trying to ensure his team wins the biggest game of his life. So yeah, it's a really interesting process that so much of it can take place before the season's ended for these coaches. But yeah, it's a bit of excitement for us all every year, isn't it? That we get to keep track of this, kind of make our similar to the mock drafts, I suppose. We're absolutely speculating on what teams are going to want to do, and then we get to see where we were right, and more often than not, where we were wrong.
And the way I look at it too is, I don't know that Buffalo's coaching hire changes the players we would draft on offense. Right? Whether Buffalo hired Kubiak or whether we hired Joe Brady, our needs on offense are relatively few. We need offensive line and wide receiver.
Yeah.
Right? So that might change offensive line a little bit. But we know Buffalo's not drafting a slot receiver because we have Kincaid, we have Shakir, and a lot of us think Keon Coleman should be moved to the slot, right? So Buffalo has 3 slot receivers. So Buffalo's looking for a player that can play Z or a player that can play X. We don't need any of the Mekhi Lemons of the world. For as good of a player as Lemon is, somebody on Buffalo now can't play. Somebody that you're paying a lot of money to can't play because you drafted Mekhi Lemon. So yeah. It does, for as good as the player is, it just doesn't look like it's a fit. Now some of us say you make that fit because the player is that good, but it's still it's a tough sell that you have to do roster gymnastics to get your first round pick in the field.
Absolutely. I think that kind of reflects again on some of the drafts that we were doing there. That, for example, if Mekhi Lemon fell to the Seahawks at 32, we'll pretend that there's a world where that might happen. I would go for that and go, right, we can make that work. However, that's because I have him as probably my wide receiver 2 in this draft. So I think that when it came to KC Concepcion, that's another one that I'm like, that's a bit of a clash in style with what we have. It's not necessarily the biggest need, and while I like him as a player, I don't have him rated quite as highly. So I think that's one that, despite him being maybe a sensible pick at 32 in terms of where he's ranked on kind of a draft board, it's not a fit for the Seahawks. So that was one that despite him potentially falling to me in that draft, I have to look at and go, there's a better option out there for the Seahawks. Maybe not a better player, but a better option.
See, and that is the design of the simulator, is for you to create that conversation while you do a mock draft on a podcast.
Yeah,
that's the beauty. Peter, do you want to let everybody know about all of the written Seattle Seahawks content you make?
Yeah, so as you can see, I'm Peter Quinn. My handle on Twitter/X is at Peter Quinn 1997. You can get all of my content there, whether it's here with the Draft Professors and the Mrs. Irrelevant podcast, or in my Seahawks writing role with the Huddle UK. It's at Join the Huddle UK. You can get it there as well. 32 different teams all covered there. It's UK-based content creators. And so whoever you support, there will be articles on that website for you, kind of discussing your favorite team. If you're a Seahawks fan, then it's a lot of it is my stuff there. We've got podcasts as well. But this is my written content there. I'm going to have more articles going up in coming weeks. You can see my stuff there, and also some of my draft boards as I publish them, kind of probably following the conclusion of the NFL season. And then you can see my stuff there on X at Peter Quinn 1997.
And I want to remind everybody to give Peter a follow, like he just said. Draft Professor cannot create this content without Peter coming on the podcast once a week. He's here every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. I think by the time this podcast ends, it's close to 1 a.m. local time for Peter in Scotland. We can't do this without Peter, so please give him a follow. Next week, Clint should be back. Durst should be back. We will have other non-mock draft content for you on Wednesday next week. I do want to remind everybody that Draft Professor at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It's the same on YouTube and Twitter. What you get from Draft Professor is draft content every day. Draft Professor has 110 podcasters. About 30 of them you'll see in any given week. And every Friday we do a group mock draft. So if we would love for our followers to join our mock drafts. We want to meet you. And what I mean by meet you is we want to see you in the chat mock drafting for your team. So every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, the pinned post on Draft Professor on the Twitter page is the group mock draft. So sign up for your favorite team. It is by far like the most. I love all the podcasts, but I have the most fun on Fridays. So give that a whirl. If you haven't done one of those with us, I believe this weekend is our 4th group mock, because we've been doing them the entire month of January, and they're just going to keep getting more difficult, because now as more people come in, you can come in and experiment with your draft strategies, and you're doing it against people, not a simulator. Not as easy as it sounds. So for Peter, myself, for the 110 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We will see you on a podcast again in an hour where Newt and Owen discuss their quarterbacks. Thank you very much.